Good afternoon.
So this talk is on the Internet of Things, the connecting world. So this course, Internet of Things or IoT, has been the department. So I appreciate all the motivation. One hour, so one half an hour for any kind of queries. So I request all the students kind of a queries. So you may please type in the chat box, and later it could be answered by. Before we actually start the presentation, let me first review the interesting journey of our beloved speaker, Professor Surya Durbha. Indeed, he's our eminent alumni. Undergraduation and post graduation in our college. So later, from where he proceeded towards his PhD program at the Mississippi State University at Starkville. He also worked as assistant and associate professor at the same university in USA, and has over about 10 years of expertise in USA. Then later, several of international as well as national stature. And he has received many international grants from the National Science Foundation, USA, as well as the DST grants, the Department of Science and Technology from our country. So, very good reputed research organizations across several parts. Talented have Professor Surya here in this platform. So, not audible.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Josna, for the kind words. So shall I go ahead and share my presentation?
Yeah, sure.
I hope you are all able to see the slides.
Yes, sir, we are seeing so.
Yes, okay, good. So good afternoon. Professor Josna on this particular discipline. So today, data. So this data, how do we do analytics on this IoT data? And if time permits, I will touch upon some of the work that we do at CSRE. So this is part of a larger presentation that I have, but I'll try to fit it into the 1 hour module here. So before it covers end to end both the hardware how it can be used in tandem with IoT, and how embedded HPC is becoming popular these days, where when if you want to work on big data, you would need much more processing capabilities than what you can afford with low power devices like the IoT devices. And then it's tied to a single domain with no chance to move over different domains to work with in interdisciplinary mode. The on the lightweight kind of is it got of advantage not an easy process. So how this various diagrams so you have the book and read more into it. So sensor network technologies, it's very fast evolving. Today we are talking about nanotechnologies. We're talking about sensors in terms of nano. Like sensors like that in your hand, that sand field, and then nutrients or any of these soil related parameters, and then continuously giving information. And then this could be those sensors that are also biodegradable, or those things that don't do anything, just do it, and the job is done, you just show them away. This is where technology, and it's going to be in the future. Our lives, all your cell phones, they have got so many sensors. There's a lot of monitoring sensors, traffic sensors, you name it. And then with the advent of IoT, services that are used for us. No, these are not just technology demonstrations. These are some of the things that we are doing to make our lives easier. So as you can see, this word parameters. You can see all kinds of parameters about the environment are being measured. Temperatures, for example, pressure. Light dense point clouds, of the built environment, of the indoor environments, all kinds of things, or driverless navigation. A lot of these sensors things are really what, and then so something, the temperature is changing automatically. We are so many. So already 2020, we are in 2022. So connected world. So the vision of IoT can be thought from different perspectives. One is about your impact or persistent well able to communicate with other things. Things that are your standards in semantics perspective. We do not know what this data is coming from, which sensor, and what's its accuracy, what is the duration of its measurement. We know nothing about it. Is it useful for our particular purpose? Is it accurate enough for me to use in my project? We don't know for our specific purpose. The standards semantics. Are you talking about the same kind of? Are you talking about temperature of water, or you're talking about temperature of air? What is it? Temperature, if you're just saying. So the semantics have to be understood. If you want to have seamless access, and then anytime, anywhere, and then access them in any. So what is that going to do? It's going to create a big societal impact. So it's going to do a lot of transformation. Already we are seeing a lot of our smart cities or India integrated into a lot of existing systems. And then it is interdisciplinary. There are so many applications here. Your home energy management or your other infrastructure institutions. And then we are talking about and then we are interested to get a lot of this information to these people here, municipal command and control center, because these are the people who can control and then provide all this information coming from various sensors that we have set up in this environment. And then these people should be able to make sense of what is coming from where and what it is can be used for, and how to integrate hospital. Then how do you make people go through a traffic jam, and when, for example, there is a event has happened, a flood has happened, and then healthcare infrastructure has to work with the transportation infrastructure. Yeah, for it, both for its supply chain and then also for patients. And then the smart grid, the grid has these kinds of applications are not just by themselves. They are very deeply connected with each other. There is interdependence. These kinds of connections, and then a lot of this come from a geospatial angle. So we are interested in understanding location so that you can give a little bit more. For example, it's happening somewhere. It's a measurement somewhere, and there is a distribution of these temperatures happening over a locality, right? And there's a way to sample these things and then make measurements. Similarly, you're talking about air quality nowadays. Our of these air pollution control monitoring stations, we already have data from these networks, a different network, and then all of web. How do you make sensors addressable over the web? Is standardized by the Open Geospatial Consortium, a lot of big players involved. Here, get this sensors discoverable? How do you access and retrieve data and then get this data in a standardized form? How do you ask the sensors to make a particular kind of data acquisition based that sensor which is measuring every 1 hour, maybe you want every 5 minutes because something emergency has happened. How do you make it do that over the web? How do you task it? How do you find that particular sensor that is measuring a temperature at say 20, let's say 15 meters? In this whole world, there are millions of temperature sensors. So if you a big issue in IoT also tomorrow. Is you don't understand what is the lineage of this data, how this data has been acquired. Addressable sensors telling about themselves. Just like we talk about ourselves, sensors, we ask a sensor, what this is the accuracy, everything. Then IoT networks we are going to have in the future. So keeping those in mind, there are a little bit on those things. This is, for example, a sensor enabled home. This is similar to what we are talking these days from an IoT perspective. But here we have got different kinds. And we have a service, a web and do all those things remotely. You should be able to do that. So that you can get some. And then users should also be able to subscribe to sensors and then obtain. You should be so later we'll time. So chat amount of data. But then we should also understand what is the context in which this data is being captured. So temperature you are measuring from the context of air pollution monitoring is different from a temperature that you are measuring from a weather station, from a meteorological perspective. From a meteorological perspective, if you want to measure temperature, there is a particular standard given by World Meteorological Organization. You cannot measure temperature anywhere you want. Yeah, there is a specific high measuring it before you give that data. So the context has to be understood properly. It's just because, oh, it's a temperature. And then data enable things that are accessible, interpretable by other things. Because we want to move into that level where things loop all the time. So that one thing can access other things, understand its current state, and do something with it. So the web of things, knowledge-based knowledge representations are very important. So the challenge is they need to interoperate data or say five different semantic representations, data models, syntactic, structural representations, then it's very difficult to interoperate between them. So before even let them work on it, we have to come to come to an understanding that all, otherwise just each company will build their own and communication technologies and interoperability in different layers. So a lot then what it means is that you have created a truly interoperable system. So relations of objects and the events. So here changeable and extensible. So you can extend these networks both in terms of spatially, geographically, and also in terms of the multitude of devices that you can integrate. That kind of extensibility has to be there. Otherwise, it is a broken system later. As sitting there, you will not be able to do anything with it. We'll have all is there, mobile networks, also narrowband IoT, they also want a piece of the pie in the IoT. So they have come up with this narrowband IoT. So just like you are subscribing and then you are recharging your mobile phone, you will recharge the IoT devices that you have put there with some this thing. They'll be prepaid, postpaid, all these things can come. It makes it easier. But then you have to say, is it that useful for your kind of application? There is another, for example, there is a LoRa. For example, 10 kilometers, around 10 kilometers you can send when there is no interference in between. So like that, there are and then at the data management, there is also a need for standardized data models. So interoperability is happening, you can create a lot of applications. And these applications can talk with each other seamlessly. You will give a rich experience to the users. So standardized has developed this IoT Light Ontology, where specifically each concept in this so the sensing device has got a deployment and it has a location. For example, what is a sensor? A sensor has got some units, whatever it is measures, the measurement has got its units. It has got some metadata, there is a resolution. Yeah. Like this, and has got a sensing device. So sensor has got a sensing device and it exposed by some service. Because this, whatever is the sensing device, you are exposing it through some web service, right? You're not directly accessing it. Mostly we don't access the sensor directly. We make it available through the web. Right? So there is a service that has got some area of coverage. It could be a point, or this point information may be valid for a particular radius, depending upon the kind of measurement you are making. Yeah. And then it is called the geospatial location related to these things. So like this, the terminologies for these these concepts involved in IoT are standardized. So these concepts not make up your own, so that now your system can be used, your data and everything could be understood and used by other applications. Basically, the applications are what we are interested in. So, and then this data is also dynamic. So then you will need to capture and process this data in real time. If you want to do that, what we are getting is a stream that you have measured is a source of one streams, not data coming from one parameter, but from multiple. But then each of them is giving data in a different time interval. One is measuring every 1 hour, other is measuring every 5 seconds, other is every few minutes. So when streams. So again, you got a stream observation. It is derived by many things, many ways. There should be different methods to it. Some of the methods we important ways to look at. Should I capture a window like this to capture this one, or should it be a window or like this to capture it, or should be a narrow window like this to capture an event? What is it? And there could be many other streams of data that is coming. Right? So then, so events. So what you see here is a way of representation, of the in this kind of IoT. So if we want to do analytics, one kind of analytics is the real-time analytics, also called as edge analytics. Most of the time, we are interested to do edge analytics because we got a stream of data that is coming in. It's telling us something, and it is better to capture what it is telling us at that point of time instead of saving it later and talking. So whatever. So a lot of times there have this device data flows and streams into the edge. One thing is simply to just give a real time. That's okay. It just tells you, it gives you situational awareness. What that are happening in this system. So we want system, right? Sensors that can measure this, for example, heat. It can measure various temperatures. It can measure wind speeds. It can measure the humidity values. All kinds of heat indexes and all other information that you would want. So based upon it, you can ability of warning. Countries, they have deployed these G.I.T.A kind of sensors, but they are also using in tandem with satellite data. We have got a Moody's sensor, for example, which is measuring the land surface temperature using the thermal camera. So with that, we are able to give on a daily Each has got its different spatial lot of non-scientific domains come into picture, and then we assume this traffic management, this, that, but no. IoT is also used in many scientific applications, and I strongly suggest you all to explore these kind of scientific applications. Otherwise, you'll be doing all this parking lot management, this, that, these kinds of trivial kinds of applications. They're good. I think by now you must have heard them. The islands. Anybody?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Yes,
where?
sir.
Where did it happen? Anyone?
It's near to Australia.
Okay. What is the name of that islands? Archipelago. What is that?
Tonga. Tonga.
Tonga. So you see, only small, tiny pieces of that island are remaining. Not a lot of it is now in the all that magma and everything is now has reached many seismic GPS sensor networks have sensor webs, and there are command control which can get this data both from ground on kinds of sensors, and then they do data processing and then keep these people ready, responders. Nepal earthquake, 18 satellites data coming to our NRST Hyderabad, right? And then they were the nodal agency to disseminate this information about the damage, extent of damage. Weather forecasting sensor webs. These are all called these are the weather balloons you must have heard about. Right? Our cyclone warning center sends it morning. Have you anytime seen that? This radio sound is these are also reach very high in the atmosphere, stratospheres. And then we have got airborne sensing systems that track hurricanes. We got radar networks, Doppler radars, and then buoy systems. These are all platforms that these are both from a moored buoys, means it's tied at the bottom of the ocean, and then on the platform there are several kinds of sensors measuring, for example, water-related parameters, marine-related parameters, currents, sea surface temperatures, many other related parameters they're measuring. And some of them are moored, some of them are drifting buoys. You just put all the sensors, leave it in the ocean. It will go for many, many kilometers, send you the data. These are all useful for tsunami warnings. India has established few years back, INCOIS in Hyderabad is the agency that gives data for all this. INCOIS. Take a look at it. So what we are talking here, these are also all related to our sensing systems and IoT. Everything is can we put in an IoT perspective? So I will quickly go through some applications. Okay, I'm not going to talk more on the services because these are all related to specific web services that are standardized with OGC, and it needs a lot more background to be understood before I explain all these things. But for the sake of understanding the use case, I'll quickly go through one by another. So water quality monitoring is an application where you've got sensors that are, you can place IoT based sensors to monitor water quality. Water quality is a very important parameter that has to be measured both for drinking water perspective and then also for other purposes, agriculture purposes. Our Ganga River basin water quality monitoring is happening all the time. There is a, there are cases where you have detected arsenic, other heavy metals kind of pollutions happening. Very dangerous kind of water quality at some of these basins. So to be able to do that, we put these sensors and then get sensors data. Sensors addressable via the web through services, and then clients that be able to access this service. Here's another example of a forest fire monitoring. So don't worry what these are all. This is the middleware, the web services through which you are making these sensors available. So what I want you to focus on this one and this one. So if you focus on this, what you see is the variety of platforms and sensors that are being used for a particular application. Airborne platforms, surveillance cameras, positioning systems, weather stations, all of them form together, they can form a network. And then you're talking about UAVs, micro UAVs, very small kinds of UAVs, mobile sensor platforms, moving vehicles in which you have installed air quality monitoring sensors, weather stations. Why do you want weather station? We understand, for example, what is the temperature or what is the wind speed? What is the prevailing wind speed that this air pollution is going to be moved to? So depending on the wind speed and direction, we can make some predictions. Fire detection in buildings, sensing systems installed inside buildings, and they all form a network. And then based upon it, we are trying to create some kind of fire control systems and then send alerts. Flood warning, water level monitoring, sensors related to soil moistures. Because soil moisture plays an important role. If it is dry, water will get absorbed. Right? Important to understand. So rain gauge sensors to understand how much is the intensity of rainfall. If this much amount of intensity of rainfall is there for another 5 hours, where are the areas that are inundated? What you do is you take these sensors coming from these sensor networks and then plug it on to hydrology models. These hydrology models take all these parameters and then we'll be able to make a prediction saying what are all the places that might get inundated. So a lot of our cities now have these models. Bangalore has got a good model developed by ISC Bangalore, for example. Our Mumbai has got these models. They understand that if this much amount of rain falls for this many hours, they quickly know which are the areas that are going to be inundated. And then they can respond, send pumps, take out the water, all those things. So what we see here is you got many sensors and then the data is coming to a gateway. So one way is to do whatever we want at the gateway. Can we quickly do something? But the gateway may or may not possess enough computational power. So then we have this fog computing, edge computing, fog computing. So new concepts on computing have emerged. So IoT and big data from these applications, that what we have seen is there's a lot of data coming. And then this is a big data, millions of devices, extremely fast rate at which this data is coming to us. And then it is coming from a variety of devices. So and then this variety is both structured, unstructured, semi-structured. So earlier, most of the work that we did was on the structured data. We are interested in RDBMS. We are interested in data warehousing. Those kinds of. Now these days we have got this data lake concept, where we work with both structured, unstructured data that all the data is saved. We are not going to delete any data, keep everything. We can do analysis later on historical data. So many reasons. So there are concepts of data lakes out there. So purpose of IT data analytics, we want to automate decision-making process. So we don't want to be, get into the loop all the time. We want the IoT devices themselves can automatically do some actions. So we can increase the efficiency with which the process can be executed. So we need to do analytics. So supply chain processing operations can be done very efficiently if we do this one. Then condition-based monitoring. Industries are adopting a lot of this IoT. IIoT is a big term these days, industrial IoT. Government is actually funding a lot of projects. We have this technology innovation hub at IIT Bombay. So I suggest you all to take a look at the technology innovation hub at IIT Bombay, which is specifically funding projects related to IoT. So there is a call very recently, a couple of days back, related to agriculture and then education also. See if you are interested. See if you can send a proposal. So these are all, even if you don't win, don't worry. It's a way of practice for you to get into this kind of a game, for these proposals, trying to work on projects that are of interest to the nation, that's going to help the nation. If you see that proposal, what they are asking for agriculture, it's really wonderful kinds of tasks that they have put forward. And then whatever you learn in the IoT, you can put it to use. So condition-based monitoring, predictive maintenance, critical in many industries, healthcare, manufacturing, all those things. Efficiency of our services. You are taking goods that are perishable, and then you have to maintain certain temperatures all throughout your journey, and you have to make an overnight journey or 2 days journey. So so what happens is you need to put a lot of sensors inside. So automatically it will be able to do it. It will be able to sense and tell you what is the current status. It will keep on switch on, switch off all the ACs or all the coolness devices. It can alert various people. The warehouse is coming, or is going to deliver to certain shops or whatever. All these things can be made very, very efficient. So 4 main types of data analysis: descriptive, what happened; diagnostic, why did it happen; and then predictive, what is likely to happen; and prescriptive. Prescription is like a doctor prescription, right? It'll tell you what to do, what is the best course of action for this kind of health condition that you have. So types of IoT data analytics, again, descriptive analytics from an IoT standpoint. We want to know that because IoT devices are continuously monitoring. So we want them to descriptively tell us in forms of charts, figures, give us some feedback, tell us what is the situation right now about a particular aspect that is happening. It is monitoring it. Tell me what is the water levels continuously. Show it in a form of charts, or compare a couple of variables together like this. Diagnostic analysis, we're trying to understand what is the causative factors. So you need to examine a little bit more deeply and then try to understand what were the anomalies, what were the unexpected things that we have not foreseen, that we'd understand before, and why that this event has happened. So that kind of analytics is the predictive analytics. This a lot of us are working on these days. Yeah, most of us, everybody is interested in machine learning, deep learning. But a lot of times, a lot of this predictive analytics is fine, but then it works on historical data. It can, so you need to have a large amount of data, especially if you're talking about deep learning, you need to have a very large amount of training data where the algorithm can create some hypothesis. So it has to see all the different variabilities happening in the data through the training data you have to capture. If you miss some of these kinds of distributions, then your models will not be good. So it consists historical data. So analytically trigger. So if similar kind of data is coming, that is within that statistical distribution in which you have created your model. Anything outside may not. But there are several different kinds of, machine learning models have come. Right? There is a transfer learning. There is domain adaptation, where you transfer what you know before into something, a target domain, which you may or may not have seen what is there before. But your experience that you have before, so pre and post. You're taking the pre, whatever you understood before a flood, for example, and then what you understand before the flood, take that knowledge and apply it to the domain after the flood has happened. So this is transfer learning, domain transfer. You can transfer features knowledge. You can transfer, parameters knowledge. So many ways to transfer this knowledge. So analytics can quickly trigger auto configurations. So that is a mobile sensing network. For example, an event is going to happen, quick sensors will go there, capture what, and do so. Prescriptive analytics is more like, what are my options? What steps do I need to take? What actions will address this issue? So, these two kinds of analytics we will talk about. So, I'm going to conclude in another 10-15 minutes. Okay.
Yeah.
Look at the real-time analytics, then we can conclude. Data stream mining approaches. So in this approach, what we have is, how do you understand these hidden knowledge patterns? So stream mining is like our normal data mining, but applied on streaming data. So only problem is that the data is not static. The algorithms that we build on static data, like the ones we are saying earlier on the historical data, which is static in nature, all machine learning models need such kind of data to work on. So any machine learning model that you take SVMs or you take Navy Base or any kinds of parametric, non-parametric approaches, they will not work on streaming data. So there is an entirely new branch of mining, data mining, that is specifically developed around streaming data. Because of the continuously changing nature. So data streams, there are continuous, there are massive streams. There is only a way to temporary storage, but this data is coming quickly. You cannot store a lot of data. When I cannot build a model on a pre-understanding training information, because that is going to quickly change. So traditional data mining algorithms have to be adapted to streaming data. So in my book, I have listed some of the unsupervised, supervised stream data mining approaches, and also links on where to learn more about this data stream mining approach. So if you're interested, you can look at MOA, Massive Online Analysis. This is an uh, open source tool that you can use to work on streaming data mining. So you can create a stream clustering, for example, clustering of streaming data, or you can do classification. So stream mining engines or specialized engines working on for stream mining data, and then in memory, a lot of them. So they need a lot of computational power to do this. Then there are other kinds of analytics which are more popular, which are relatively easier to work on than the stream data mining approaches or the event processing based approaches. So they are based on what is called as event stream processing or complex event stream processing. So idea is, how do you capture interesting patterns from data, either coming from single or multiple IoT devices, and then able to capture it. So what is streaming data? The data that resides persistently somewhere is no longer interesting, is it not? It is there. So normally what happens in this IoT process, there is a sensing layer where you're getting different devices and then getting data from these devices. You're taking it, putting through the gateway and then sending it to the cloud and storing in a cloud storage somewhere. And then later, you apply some kind of AI machine learning kinds of things on that data and then build some models. This is a very common process of working with the IoT data. But then data that is residing somewhere is no longer interesting. Right? But data that is constantly moving, perpetual motion is what is more interesting. Because there are a lot more things to capture from them. So, and then value of data can decrease over a time. There is an expiry period. Disaster monitoring requires continuously updated information. If I say something happened after 1 hour, it's useless for me. So rapid response services have to use real-time data. So weather prediction for the next couple of hours expires as soon as that period is over. Similarly, air quality monitoring. Air quality will change over a period of time. It can quickly change the direction of it. Sudden rainfall or drop of temperature, anything can happen. So if you are working in the real time, it is interesting. So, so the window is important. At what window are you working with is what we want to understand. So stream defined real-time continuous ordered. Ordered means implicitly arrival time or whatever is the time stamp, the sequence of items. So you cannot control the way they are coming. Or you cannot store the entire stream in somewhere. So, for example, phasor measurement units. Some of you are from electrical engineering, you know that if they collect samples like 30 samples per second or 60 samples like that. Imagine how much data it will be in 1 hour. Yeah, at the end of the day, how much data it will be. There's no point storing all the data. What you would want to store is some interesting things that are happening. Imagine all these PMUs distributed geographically around a large area and data is coming. And you want to understand something about this grid, this area. And tomorrow talk something related to cascading failures and all these things. You want to relate. So you need to have a system that works on streaming data. So there are so many stream data sources, sensors data, health and fitness, GPS data, inventory management, industrial machinery. Many are there. So cloud computing is when you store the data in the cloud and then do something. Edge computing is computing takes place here at the device level itself or at the gateway in between. In between. So normally these days, some companies have come up with these edge servers, where you can do part of the part for data, part of for other kinds of doing other kinds of things for doing computations and all these things. So physical distance. So the physical distance between your sensor and your computation, where you are computing, doing analytics, is very low here as compared to this. So imagine data coming like this, right? Timestamps, 9:02, 10, like this. Thousands of records arriving, and then we're talking about uh, data like temperature, humidity, precipitation, wind speed, like this. If data is coming like this, Each will be one data stream. Temperature data stream, humidity, precipitation, wind speed. Each is a different data stream. Normally, if you got a data stream, you could do data ingestion, and then you do pre-processing of this data, and then put it into some buffer, do stream processing, directly store it. So we are not storing the entire data. We are doing some processing and storing those things in our storage. So the traditional way is to take a stream, store it, and then process and analyze. Here, what you're doing is you got a stream data. There is no storage. Directly process, analyze, and then store it, and then you make the decisions based upon it. So capture events, make decisions, capture those interesting things, store it. Tomorrow, if you want, you go back and look at these things. So the traditional batch processing is not applicable to the stream processing because the data is processing is there doing instantly. It's a continuous process, so there is reduced latency and throughput is reduced. Because you cannot process a lot of amount of data in such a small amount of time. The throughput gets reduced. So mainly unbounded data streams or inputs. You can have real-time analytics. So bounded data is structured, unstructured, you device data, IoT, batch processing, like you can do in Apache Spark or Hive on Spark. They're consumed by applications, many kinds of applications, like your Facebook, all the social media and all. This is all bounded data, whereas unbounded data, IoT device is continuously providing data. And then you apply certain filters down the stream and finally get what you want. So unbounded, no definite start or end point. It is just there perpetually. Continuous processing, and then data needs to be processed as soon as it is ingested in unbounded streams. You don't need to. You just put it there, and whenever you want, you process it. And then ordering of events is important. This is this is an important point. So the way these events are happening is important because for your analytics purpose, that event has to happen first before the other events can happen. This is what your understanding of the particular phenomenon is. So the ordering of events is important, the way they are. So event processing was event time versus processing time. So event can happen at any time. So it can measure, for example, temperature is 50, 30 hours. It is the phenomenon is captured, then there's a time stamp associated with it. But then while it is arriving to you when you're processing, there could be lag happening in many ways, in different reasons. There is a problem with your sensor, there is a network problems, there are other kinds of problems that are there. So what happens? There are some of the things that arrive earlier than what they are. They are older, the samples may not be reaching you at the correct point of time. So they are all jumbled, they're out of order. This needs to be taken care of. This is very important. So Google has developed is also working on stream processing. They have got the stream engine. I suggest you all to take a look at it. So requirements of stream processing, you keep the data moving, use some query languages specifically developed for streams. And then handle the stream imperfections. The data gets delayed, there could be missing, it could be out of order. And then you should be able to generate some outcomes, predictable outcomes out of it. And then you are integrating the stored and streaming data together. This is important. Some stored data you have to take a streaming data, integrate them together, then build your models. So guarantee data safety that it is not lost, and then make it available. And then you have to partition this into so many different chunks before you can process it automatically because the data is just too huge, it's coming at it with a lot of velocity. Yeah? And process, respond instantaneously. So there are certain things, semantics related to edge analytics. What we are talking is the edge analytics, at most once. So if the events are dropped, if they are not processed correctly, then there's a data loss if you're processing only once. If at least once each input event is monitored to see the processing successful within a certain time window. If it is not done, you resend it again processing and then nesting. So, but then what problem is, you can have duplicates. Exactly once is when events are processed, at least once duplicates detected and discarded. This is the illustration shown. So there are tools that are available to do the stream processing, like Storm, Wheel, Apache Samza. I recommend Apache Clean. We worked a little bit on this one. It's a very good tool to work with events and event processing. So normally you have census data coming through a gateway, and then you get the data using some kind of a protocol. See, we can use MQTT or SCO-app. Here we used constrained open access protocol, and then get the data as a stream using Apache Cloud. Pass that streaming data into Flink, then do our complex event processing, and then visualize using your elastic search and elastic visualization, Kibana. So earlier I showed you that this edge analytics can happen this way when you got directly data. This is called hot analytics. There are cold analytics when you do batch processing. Both of the data are coming from IIT gateways only, except that you're processing one quicker than the other. So complex event processing is a method to understand, detect, correlate, and process these data coming, the streaming data. So a simple example is if you have got a complex event processing engine and then you're talking about a tire pressure, there are pressure sensors, there are speed sensors, timestamps. So if the pressure reduced by 10 units, for example, within between greater than 24 hours, it is losing pressure. That's what we can assume. But it is happening within 5 seconds, there is a tire burst. So complex event processing engine will be able to get the streaming information coming and apply some operators within certain windows, time windows, and then be able to make some decision like this. So see, so many events, capturing events are coming. The EP engine will capture the events and then it will be able to send these events. So what happens is when you have got simple events coming, simple data points coming from sensors, but then when they combine together, you find complex events. We are not talking about single streams, but multiple streams coming together, forming complex events. So here you have got many atomic events combining together to form a complex event. So event streams are happening, and then many atomic events combining together to form a complex event. So this is what we want to capture. So applications of complex event processing, many fraud detection. So these are all non-IT applications are there already. CEP is there for more than a decade. A lot of this fraud detection, your credit card fraud, people, a lot of these companies use complex event processing already. But how do we use it for streaming data from IoT is what the focus from an IoT perspective. So fraud detection, self-driving cars, factory monitoring, like this, many applications are there. So just to show you how to write an operator, create a pattern. So if I want to capture a particular say traffic pattern using a complex event processing. So using any programming language, for example, you can use Java or any of these things. You should be able to create a pattern. You can create when to start that pattern, when that streaming data has to be started, what is the time, when the next has to be captured. So normally what we say here is a pattern when say that I want data coming, streaming data coming from this sensors coming first, and this one coming next from the other sensors, and the third one is followed by this one. So if these two events are happening, simply it is not the event I'm interested in. it should be followed by a third event happening within this time window. Then only that is something of interest to me. So like this, you can make it very complex way of capturing your events. So you can create filters, create the filter condition, and then use this as an operator running on your streams. Like this, you can create many operators that are required so that you can capture a lot of interesting events. Like I said, you can use this data streaming API from Flink. The streaming data, Flink engine, and then there's output. Apache Beam also suggests you to look at, which allows you to use any of these stream processing kind of things, stream engines, either Flink, Spark, or any, based upon your requirement. You can do both stream processing, multi-processing. This is a Beam from Google. Google has developed this Beam, but then now it is in the Apache domain. So here you can see IoT-based real-time air quality index monitoring system about wireless sensor networks, high-performance gateways, streaming data, and all these things. So the idea is to have a simple event, two kinds of events that we want to capture. One is based in a time window, other is change in the risk parameter value. So we start with the risk parameter value, and then see how this data going into the CP engine. We'll keep on discarding unless we find that this risk parameter is within a 10 seconds window. Otherwise, it is not of interest to me. You generate a alarm. So this here we're talking about single parameter, but you can have multiple parameters, and one is within 10 seconds, other is 5 seconds, then other is say 15 seconds. If all this happen together at the same time, then you generate alarm. So step here. So once you do that, it will say, oh, what is the air pollution? And we try to link it with for what is the activity that is causing this air pollution. For example, construction activity. There is a change in the PM 2.5, particulate matter 2.5 sensor values because of the construction activity. Then you can do visualization. So I'm going to stop here. A lot of work we have done at IIT Bombay. Maybe next time I talk related to the work that we have done there to IIT. So with that, I'll stop. I'll be happy to take questions.
You have any questions? Hemant?
Yes, madam.
Have any questions?
Yes, madam. I have one question.
Yeah, please do ask.
Sir, good evening, sir.
Yes. Good evening.
Sir, yes, sir. There are in future we will have to interact with more number of IoT devices. Meanwhile, in interacting with IoT devices, there is just some data storage from each and every device. For that storage of data, we need clouds, sir. Sir, for each and everything, we need more number of clouds. Means the cost of the cloud is also very high. How will handle this problem, sir?
So that is the reason why, is in the future, the idea is not to store each and every data point, right? That is one of the advantages of doing edge analytics or fog computing is that you reduce the amount of data to be stored. As you may have already understood, if you look at any IoT device data, a lot of the data is redundant, right? The one data point, next data point coming from another 1 hour, the data will be the same. What is the use of saving all the data? What are you going to do with it? Instead, if you are able to summarize that 1 hour data into 1 or 2 data points and then save it,
That is, you consolidate the data.
future you can recreate it if you want. So a lot of data compression approaches, and then also one is to do data compression at the storage itself. Maybe you may not gain too much because of the unprecedented amount of data, but the other is only store that which is interesting to you. That is interesting to that application. So you are saving a lot. That's how we are going to work on that problem.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. We are saving some of the data. Sir, meanwhile, for now, we think that this data is not useful. For some other day, we need that data. Then what we do, sir?
Yeah. So that is the idea. So the data lake concept is to store everything. But the other thing is, will you be able to recreate? Suppose there, for 1 hour, the data point value is 10, right? And then you
Yes, sir.
measure this 10 value a million times, right? Will you store million tens, or you just say that 1 hour 10, and then tomorrow you can create that that million values, right? So it is smart way of storage. That is the analytics. That is the beauty of doing edge analytics. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Sir,
Anyone, any question? Hemant, you want to ask still more?
yes, madam. I want to ask,
Please.
sir, how IoT improves security, sir? It is one of the advantages for IoT. I read somewhere.
Yes, security in terms of what? You mean defense or what is it?
Security in data, sir.
Data security. Okay.
Yes, sir.
See, I mean, data security, IoT specifically is not something, but then you can have this IoT kind of processing. For example, CEP is a kind of an IoT based processing where you can do this fraud detection. It is a kind of a security measure. So the idea is that if you do streaming processing, which is very specific to do IoT kind of a data, then security can be improved significantly. So the idea is, shall I look for something fraud happening as every day at the night, or is it good to look every 10 minutes and see what is happening, right? Vis-a-vis. So the kind of processing power that IoT brings in is different. But you'll have to be smart in trying to put the kind of devices, for example, RFIDs or those kinds of devices, which have to be, data has to be processed continuously. Then you can have more security. That is one. Second thing is, IoT data itself has got security problems, right? Security and privacy problems, because now we are going to put sensors everywhere, and a lot of our privacy is taken away. And then
Yes, sir.
security is also a problem, because so many people can hack this. Your home automation system can be hacked easily, and someone can increase the temperature of your room significantly, or make it very cool, or your smart fridge can be hacked and did something else. So the security has to be there at the device level. But these days, security we are mostly talking is the cyber security, right? At the systems level, not at the
Yes, sir.
where the data is being generated. So what we are doing, we are trying to develop this kind of security algorithms. For example, in the book I've written about elliptic curve cryptography, a lightweight kind of encryption kind of a techniques that run on low power devices without taking too much of the battery and doing all these things, that can be also moved over the network easily. Those kinds of techniques are being developed. So if you're interested, do the literature survey on this area. Okay.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you, sir.
Welcome.
One question I have, Professor Surya.
Sure.
Like, yeah, what is actually our country, the percentage of IoT systems that's been implemented here with respect to the rest of the world? Like,
Yeah, I think it's minuscule
okay,
probably, but then there is a lot of push from the government. That's I can say, because from our institution perspective, we have a lot of you know of our people involved in a lot of the standardizations and all these things. And
okay,
then this Atmanirbhar, according from the Atmanirbhar perspective, a lot of IoT is being pushed now. That's why in the beginning, I have talked about this RFP coming from our Technology Innovation Hub. Specifically, they talk about IoT innovation in agriculture.
Okay.
So, and then these are all technologies that will be immediately absorbed and productized from our domestic perspective, domestic technologies perspective.
And coming to like so many, IoT is involved with a lot of things. So right from the sensors to the technologies and then to this edge processing, fog processing and all that. So actually, are the sensors already developed, or like are these sensors relevant to a particular environment? Like a sensor that is developed somewhere in Singapore, can I use the same sensor here? Or you say
Yes,
standardization. So then the sensors they vary, they depend upon the environment, right?
yes, not all. I will give a specific example. So we had this soil moisture sensor developed by Japanese in a university. I won't name the university, but then they were trying to commercialize the soil moisture sensor, and then if they want to sell it to countries like India, they need to test in our tropical environment. So when they brought this here, we did a little testing in. We went with them and did testing in Maharashtra, and then send it them to Telangana area, arid, semi-arid regions,
Okay.
right? And then it miserably failed. It didn't
Okay.
work. Didn't work. So they had to go back again to the design and do all these things, the multiple visits. So some sensors are very specific to the environment, but
Okay.
a lot of the sensors that are built outside can be used. For example, some of the sensors that we are using for radio soundays or those kinds of things, they are developed by commercial entities, commercial off-the-shelf sensors
Okay.
that we are using
Okay.
that can readily available. And these days, IoT sensors are become very cheap and then can be used.
So, like, finally, what are the skill sets that, like, a person who wants to join as an IoT engineer in an industry? So, what are there any specific skill sets that they
Yes.
expect?
Yeah, I mean, if you IoT depends upon the profile, but it will be good to be a jack of all trades as far as IoT is concerned. You may need to get a little bit on the hardware side, understand these microcontrollers, doing this wiring, do a little bit projects yourself, trying to understand, and then also be able to work with the different kinds of this network communication protocols. That is one of the key things to understand in IoT. You should be able to use that particular kind for a technology for a purpose. Right? So that is important thing. Then the deployment and all you will learn by experience. That is not a problem at all.
Yeah.
But the other specific skills to learn is how do you manage these devices and all using the software platforms. So IoT platforms is a big area. A lot of all these big companies, Microsoft, Google, everybody has got an IoT platform. Amazon has got IoT platform. So to get hands on these IoT platforms is very important. Most of the times you will have to work with these platforms to be able to generate this kind of analytics that I talked about. So that is one thing. But if you are a researcher and you want to get into this thing, I would encourage you to go into the embedded part. If you are a hardware coming from a hardware perspective, look at the embedded part of this high performance computing. How do you bring this HPC onto a small device? For example, NVIDIA has got this Jetson Nano, right? It comes at 10,000-12,000 rupees. With this, you can build very beautiful devices that have got very high computational powers, handheld devices that can be useful. That's from a research perspective, if you're coming from that side.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyone, any questions? Participants? There is a question from Swaran Raj.
Cryptocurrencies.
Yeah.
I have no idea actually.
Okay. It's actually totally like question out of scope from this area, I guess.
But then
So,
blockchain, IoT,
Good
whether
evening, sir.
coming. Yeah, tell.
Good evening, sir. Sir,
Yes.
actually,
yes,
actually the IoT devices they usually use like digital signals, sir, like one and zero or whatever the signals they use like digital signals. But in practical life, whether it is a, as you have mentioned, like it is used in various fields, but in actual the signals might be analog as well as because they will be fluctuating also, sir. Then how this IoT device counter this problem, sir?
So what do you mean by one? What you're talking, if I understand properly, is so. For example, if you take temperature, right? So you got some device that is measuring a phenomena called heat, right? And then if it is measuring it, and then there is a change in resistance, or if it is a mercury, there is a change in mercury level, correct? But then you cannot say what is the change in mercury level or this change in resistance is equivalent to 98 degrees centigrade Fahrenheit. Sorry, how we can say that? This is an analog to digital conversion, right? So all these are all analog to digitally converted. So the calibration is important most. That's why I said lineage is important when you are working with sensors. That you cannot just take data from any IoT device and say that it is a temperature, I can use it. You cannot. How is it calibrated from the sensing of the phenomena to the actual observation? How? That's why we call it measurement to observation. Both are different. Measurement and observations are different.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. But as if you see in that way, then the data would be very large, no, sir. Then if you are going to have IoT devices in every place, then the data should be more, and the all the possible outcomes should be mentioned to the device.
Yeah, that is the challenge. That's why we are doing a lot of research. That's why these edge analytics and all these things have come.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Yes.
yeah. So, anyone, still any questions or that's all? Hemant, you have asked all your queries.
Yes, madam. I have one query.
Last one.
Yes, madam.
Yeah.
Sir, sir, what is the difference between cloud computing and edge computing, sir?
Yes. See, cloud computing. So that's what I've been talking about. See, edge computing is when you are doing the computing near the edge or near the device itself, which is actually capturing the measurement. Whereas cloud computing is when you're taking these measurements or whatever is the data that is coming from these sensors, you push it onto the cloud. So cloud is what? Cloud is not real cloud, right? Cloud is this somewhere, some place there is a data center somewhere.
Yes, sir.
Then they have got various things that can do there. They have a place to store. They have a place, some systems that can do analysis. They have done some systems that will manage all these things. There is some place where they have got these high-end computing systems which allow you to do high-performance computing. This is cloud, and then they make it all available over the internet. That's all. That's what cloud is, right? So the cloud,
Yes, sir.
so the cloud is when you pushed all this data there into the cloud, and then you do processing on the cloud. So now data is there. So assume you are on the Amazon cloud. Yeah, Amazon cloud. Have you used Amazon anytime or Google
Yes,
GCP?
sir. Yes.
Used Google computing platform. So we used it. What happens is the data is there on the cloud itself. The computing tools are also there on the cloud itself. All you need to is link them together. Correct? Whatever
Yes, sir.
algorithm you want, you apply onto the data. You can requisition some data from the cloud itself or just to cloud storage itself, do some computing. And when you're doing this computing, if you're not happy, you can also requisition for a high performance computing. For example, you can ask for a K80, a GPU. Help me, my processing is happening very slowly. Give me K80. When you're doing these deep learning things, you can use a GPU also. And it does the processing, give the answer. Fine. When you're doing AUCE analytics, you're not doing all these things. Data is coming in a stream, you're not storing anywhere. As the data is coming, you're trying to make sense of the data within certain time windows. Within certain time. So you are going to use the operators that I've shown earlier, a complex event processing operator. An predefined operator telling if temperature data is above this threshold for 10 seconds, if wind data is above this threshold for say 20 seconds, if the humidity value is less than this value for say 60 seconds, and that all happens within this time window of say 5 minutes, capture that event. Then something is going to happen in the environment. You want to capture that event. But how this event, so this operator is sitting there as the streaming data is passing through. Whenever that happens, it will capture it and send you a warning or an alert. Depends upon what is the severity of what you captured. So that is edge computing. Okay?
Yes, sir.
Right.
So I hope we'll be ending the session then. So I thank profusely Professor Surya for rendering such an excellent presentation. So I think the students would have been, the participants would have been, surely they would have been benefited with this. So I thank you, Professor Surya, for all your patience, time, and in spite of your busy schedule with classes and all, you spared a lot of time for us. So I thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Professor Josna.
Yeah.
Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah.
See you all.
Thank you. Yeah.
All the best. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye. Yes, Hemant, are you satisfied?
Yes, madam. Satisfied.
All the queries?
Yes, madam.
Hmm.
Sir shared more data.
Yeah.
Yes, madam. Some of them I can't understand, but I took
Yeah,
screenshots and
you can't understand because covered whatever
yes, madam.
was the course content. Okay, so yeah, so that were covered is not there in our syllabus. So that's it. But well, yeah, the now venture into if you want to do future work, future projects in IoT, I think you would have got some kind of Karimullah is left. That's all. What about others? Karimullah,
Yes, ma'am.
Sai Kumar is there.
Yes, ma'am.
Exam.
I'm fine.
Yes, ma'am.
Yes.
Included in the junior syllabus, ma'am, or
Yeah, it is the first time we have introduced your juniors as part of an open elective. So I have taught IoT for them. So because I invited one of the IT professors from Mumbai. So the presentation went.
Yes, ma'am.